Hey everybody, we're going to go through the video game chapter pretty quickly, so buckle up. Here we go. Bill Gates says the video game industry is bigger than Hollywood. What are some of the reasons for that, would you think? There's a lot of reasons that we should study video games. They're super concentrated. They're luring people away from traditional media. Like in my family, we spend much more time on the Xbox than we do consuming anything that NBC, CBS, or ABC gives us, right? They're filled with advertising. They're global and they can be played on many formats. You can play them on a desktop, on a laptop, on your mobile, on your tablet. A lot of different ways that you can play them. So an intro to mass comm book or an intro to mass comm class that doesn't talk about video games is missing the boat because video games are really where it's at. So a little bit of history. This is one of the first so-called video games. Look, it's basically like a pinball machine and it only had one moving part. And when the ball went into the hole, you were done. Now, this game called Contact was a little bit of an improvement because it had electronic scoring, and if you did well enough, the ball came back. Humpty Dumpty, first big reward system game. And see, that's one of the things that's different about video games than any other medium that we're studying this semester, is that there's rewards inherent the more you play, right? So if you get high scores, you get replays with Humpty Dumpty, and that's big. So a guy named Steve Russell started the Tech Model Railroad Club at MIT, which is Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Super, super, super crazy smart school. And he created a little game called Spacewar, and he didn't think that he could make money from it. But this guy, Nolan Bushnell, loved the game, figured out how to make money from it, and started a little company called Atari, which I'm sure sounds familiar to many of you. All right, so let's go back in time. There's Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, Frogger, Miss Pac-Man, Space Invaders, and Galaga. Galaga was my personal favorite. That's the one in the bottom right. Now, first-person shooter games started with Doom in 1993. Look at those great graphics, huh? And this was played, of course, on the computer because people didn't have mobile phones then. But this was when, the reason it's called first person is that it was seen through the action of the shooter. So you're not watching the game, you are participating in the game. So think about the difference between Doom and Frogger. Like with Frogger, you're watching the frog. But if Frogger was first person, you would be the frog. That would be your perspective. Does that make sense? So who plays video games? Typically, you know, the stereotype is that it's the 20-something male loner living in their parents' basement. Very, very incorrect. The average is 30, almost half are female. The average is almost 7 hours a week. I think that's really low. In our household, it's probably 20 hours a day. Especially during spring break. Now, of course, one of the big criticisms that people have had of video games, right, is that it makes us fat and sedentary. So their response to that was extra games like DDR, Dance Dance Revolution, the Xbox Kinect, and the Wii, so that you're actually moving. And this was a response to criticism. Most games are made by third-party publishers like EA. Just ask Stephen Works about his relationship with EA and his wonderful work that he has done with the Sims game. The licenses are really super expensive, so it's not like you and I could start a video game company and then come up with something from the NFL, because just to use the licenses from the NFL teams or from Star Wars or from Lego or from Harry Potter would cost a fortune. So to begin a video game company is really cost prohibitive. Let's see if I can remember. Massively multiplayer online role-playing games like Sims, Second Life, all of that. These are fabulous because it explores options. Lots of advertising within games. I told you I was going to go through this really quickly. Lots of product placement. Why is it effective? Because it doesn't seem like an ad. You know, product placement is effective in video games the same reason that product placement is effective in movies, right? Advergaming is when a brand becomes the game. So you could make a case that any Lego Star Wars game is an Advergame. SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom, Advergame. Okay, the brand is so immersed within the game that it becomes just a real long commercial for the brand. Now, advocacy gaming, according to your book, is when games are created in order to teach us something, like animal rights. The United States government created a video game to improve HIV awareness in Africa. And I put Zoo Tycoon on here because my kids learned so much about animals and habitats by playing Zoo Tycoon. And it's not like I would have said, all right, boys, you know, we're gonna study animal habitats now. It doesn't work that way, right? But because they played Zoo Tycoon, they learned. They learned. Or think about Sims or SimCity. What you're learning about planning, civic planning, and taxes and regulations. It's learning while playing. And of course, all the research says that the best learning happens when we don't realize that we're learning. And so if we can figure out a way, for example, to make calculus or American history into some sort of video game, we'd make a fortune. Let's figure out how to do that. Game ratings, yeah, nobody pays attention. What are some criticisms? Well, I'm going to leave that to you. A guy named Steven Johnson wrote a book called Everything Bad is Good for You. And what he says is that video games hone different skills than reading, that they require attention, problem solving, prioritizing, puzzles. And what he says is the dirty little secret of video games is that how much time we spend playing video games that seems like work. It's not all fun. It's work. And you fail and you try again. You fail, you respawn, you try again, you try again, you try again. So the actual model of a video game is so different than the standard classroom, right? In a standard classroom, you fail a test. In a video game, you fail, you try again, you try again, you try again. It tests your grit. And I would much, much, much rather my kids play video games than sit there and watch television. Why do you think that is? So this is Jackville. This was a city created by my son Jack when he insisted that he did not like social studies, but he learned social studies. Yeah. Okay, Steven Johnson. Let's go back here. This is a really interesting book. If you are a video game major and you need to write a paper about any of this, I would really, really strongly encourage you to read Steven Johnson's Everything Bad is Good for You. In many cases, they're nonlinear, right? So if you read a book, if I read Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, the ending is always the same. The story is always the same. She is in control of the story. But if I'm playing Call of Duty, I'm in charge of the story. I'm in charge of the narrative. I decide where my character goes. And in many cases, like in Halo, I could be in a world that I have created myself. So there's many benefits to video games that I think many people don't realize. Okay, so this is the video game lecture, and I'm going to put this on YouTube so that you can get on Edpuzzle and answer the questions and count it for attendance. See ya!